So good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Yale Innovation Summit 2026. Great to be here. Thanks for all of you for joining us. I have the distinct pleasure of sitting with the most interesting lady in the state of Connecticut. Kind of true, right? I mean, we'll see, I guess. You all can tell us at the end of the hour. This is going to be a fun conversation. We're going to talk about venture capital. We're going to talk about healthcare. Annie's journey as a founder and as the head of Oak and turning it into one of the most important healthcare and fintech VCs in the country. Her role as first lady. So we've got lots of founder advice, and even we'll close off with a prediction. So stick around. So Annie, let's just start with your journey. I think that VCs don't get enough credit, especially the managing partners, for your role as a company builder and what you did when you took over Oak, turned it into Oak HCFT. It was really a startup. And the journey that you've had is very similar to the one of any of your fintech founders. So I think it'd be good for everybody to hear about that. And if you would, I was listening to one of your podcasts, and somebody asked you about your first meeting, your first client when you were in banking in H&Q. So maybe we'll go all the way back to when you first graduated from Stanford, and then to you taking over Oak.
Okay, all right. We'll do a quick version of this. So, grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. Went to Stanford. Never been to California. Thought it seemed good school, warm weather. That was about as thoughtful as I was at that point in my life. But it was amazing because when I got out of college was when Silicon Valley really took off, and I worked for a boutique investment bank, venture capital firm. And in the first couple months that I worked there, we took Apple public and we took Genentech public. And so I worked with two of the greatest entrepreneurs ever. And I carried Steve Jobs' bags on the Apple IPO roadshow. So it was like, and he was a year and a half older than I was. I was like wildly intimidated, and like, how could somebody know so much, have such conviction at such a young age? It was incredible. You know, and we'll circle back to that because I'm actually seeing a lot more of that now in young people, and it's pretty cool. So I just decided I had to work. I'd been a bank teller all through high school and college to pay part of my way through college. And I was like, oh God, I just want to do something that every day, I'm working with people that, excite me and challenge me. And so I said, I want to get into VC, and weirdly came to Westport, Connecticut, because that was the one firm that I could find that would hire me. So that's how I made my way to the East Coast in Connecticut, and met my husband there that year. So pretty cool.
And tell us about the launch of HCFT.
Yeah, let's just call it Oak.
Oak, yeah, great. Thank you. With Patricia,
Yeah.
and how did you launch that? How did you have the guts to go off and raise your own fund?
Well, I should have done it earlier.
And the vision for it, yeah.
Typical female, I should have done it earlier. But, so I had a long almost 30-year career, 27-year career at Oak. I established, biotech was the first thing I did for 15 years. We founded Alexion, Alkermes, Cephalon, Genzyme, a whole host of companies, and then went into software and services and healthcare and fintech. And so we knew these areas really well. I had this partner, Andrew Adams, where I was working with in healthcare, and then Tricia was doing fintech. And we had a really great run, but you could also see that the venture capital industry was changing. And you've heard of Andreessen Horowitz probably, if you're sitting in this audience. And they came in about 2008 and said, we're going to be a service industry to the entrepreneur. It's not just going to be, my former partners had this view like, we're Jedi Knights, and it's just one person who's giving great advice to an entrepreneur. And actually great advice probably is the best thing you can do for an entrepreneur ultimately over the course of your time with them. But Andreessen came in and said, we're going to create a talent function and a marketing function, and they raised a ton of money, and they changed the game. But my former partners didn't really see that they had to change. And I think one thing, if you have a long career doing anything, particularly in venture, the only way you have a long career is you keep rethinking what you're doing. You keep rethinking where you're investing, how you're organized. And I just was with a group of tech investors that didn't want to change. So Andrew and I and Trisha took off, and we raised $500 million in 2014. And I can't even believe it's been 12 years because I still feel like it's a startup. And it's been pretty cool because I was a managing partner of the former fund, but it's different when you walked into something that somebody else does. And so we culturally had a reset. I mean, between the three of us, we had always behaved in certain ways. And we were always like a team thought. We didn't think it lowered the quality of the decision to have 2 or 3 people, weighing in. And so it's always been about apolitical, intellectual honesty, and, culturally supportive and as diverse as possible in venture. And so we started out with 3 of us. We have almost 50 now. We have had, a hugely, it's just like fun and constructive time. And I can definitely relate more to entrepreneurs having started up our own company and the importance, the difficulty of removing people that you don't think are either A players or just not in the right not in the right job. And we've placed a number of people in operations that should be in operations and not in investing. And I think that's the hardest thing. And I think learning over time, I've certainly had to do it with CEOs and founders and have that conversation, but have it in the most empathetic way. And I would say everybody, we are still great friends with everybody who's ever worked at Oak, and we're supportive, and they're in the right place, and we're in the right place. But you need to have those conversations, and you need to move it, and you need to have everybody be an A+ in their job, or every person you add is going to lower the quality of what you're doing versus, adding to it.
Yes. So you start with 3 people and then you go to 50. So arguably the most important decisions you've made besides your investment were who you chose to bring on board. And I've heard you talk in the past about the importance of like the analysts and associates, the young people coming into your team. And there was an article in the Journal yesterday about this is the first graduating class of AI native graduates. And my son just graduated from college this past weekend, and thank you. And I joked his diploma should say ChatGPT and then his name, because Chat did like 98% of the work. And so we're in this world where it's some combination of man and machine who we're working with, and it's becoming more important every day, I think. And it is going to be harder for people who don't come from that world to adapt. So I'm really interested in your thoughts about the importance of pulling the young people into Oak now, and what you've seen over the course of your experience. And you were this young person at Oak, right? So probably some of those early deals you talked about were deals that you sourced. So I'm really interested in your views about also the generational adoption of generational change in your organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I will comment on talent, because the most important thing we did was we hired an amazing talent lead and have 5 people now working for her, and they've been incredibly helpful internally, but externally, game changer, because in entrepreneurship, it's all about the people you back. And she has sourced probably more deals than anybody at Oak because of her relationships with people. She talks to 300 people a week. It's crazy. And one thing I've learned, because I played, we had Trivial Pursuits with our whole team at Christmas at the holiday time, and I was with the talent team. We crushed it because their memories are amazing. They remember everything, and that's why they're so good at talent. But I will say, I think for young people, people are afraid of AI and what it's doing to young people's jobs. The reality is I need more young people. I'm not just using AI tools, and I don't need those young people to do things. The reality is, for all companies, I would say being AI native is hugely important and comfortable with it and figuring out how to use the tools. So I worry more about middle management than I worry about young people, because they're going to be much more facile and adaptable. And middle management has to get on board with learning and using the tools to augment and be more productive. And I think that's probably going to be more of the crisis in my mind, ultimately, than what's happening with youth.
It's interesting. The most important hire that Lauren and our senior team made at CI was Bo Bradstreet. Where is he? There he is, Bo. And Marina. So we did the same thing. We went from 0 talent people on the team to 2, and we'll probably add. But how many people do we have following us on LinkedIn now, Bo?
Yes.
140,000?
140,000 followers. And how many did we have when you first joined? 135,000
Okay,
people.
can you come work on my husband's campaign?
Over like 3 years.
Yeah.
And they're now
Amazing.
filling across our portfolio, now filling like 130, 140, 150 jobs per year directly without, we thought we were going to have to use a bunch of outside recruiters. They're doing it themselves. I don't think they sleep at night. But for our portfolio companies and for Connecticut even, it's been a huge game changer because we would invest in companies and they would say, oh, we would love to hire the next 5 people in Connecticut, but we can't find them. And our view was they're here. We just don't know. We're not good at finding them. And then we got good at finding these 2, and it's been a huge game changer for Connecticut, for our portfolio as a whole. All right, so let's move on to the VC portion. Although we sort of crossed into it, but there's John and Paul. There's Waz and Steve, and I think you and Jonathan Bush and Todd Park are kind of the goats in this business. I don't know if there's ever been a more successful 2 back-to-back companies. So would love to hear what you saw in that Athena team when you first met them, going way back, and then fast forward to Devoted, which is another crazy story. And what that relationship has been like. Obviously, it's been hugely impactful for you and your LPs. But putting that aside, what was it about them, and how did you feel like you were part of their journey as they went from one company then on to the next? I'm really curious to hear that story.
Yeah, I think I think sometimes, and you've all felt it, you know people when you meet them, and you're just like, these people are special. And I would say for them, and this doesn't happen that often, where healthcare is really a mission. And I do feel like when we invest in healthcare, we do have to feel like it is a mission for people. They do want to improve the system. It's not just a financial play to make more money, but they're commercial, and they know that to have something long lasting, it has to work. Financially and economically. And I think with those 2, Jonathan Bush and Todd Park and Eddie Park, his brother, who actually created the software for Athena Health, were just an incredible combination at that moment of resilience and positivity and just relentless, effort. And I'll tell you one story. That was sort of funny because we had some older, wiser people on the board at that time. This is 25 years ago. We started Athena, and they were really on the comm committee, and they really wanted Jonathan and Todd to have EBITDA measures and profit measures, and goals for their people, and that's how they're going to reward them. And all right, Jonathan Bush absolutely refused. Todd Park said, we're not doing that. It is going to be about customer satisfaction. How happy are our customers? And we know we have a good economic model. It started at 50% margins because it was software service. Basically, they started out with rev cycle management. They were just taking the local, billing shop that was done by, a couple old ladies filling out forms to, they automated it. It was the first cloud software company in healthcare. And then they became an EHR, 7 years later, company. But they were all about, we know the margins are going to be fine. We're in software, but we just want to make sure that our customers are happy, and that is going to be the mark. And they were absolutely right at the end of the day. It was fascinating. And so the follow-on story to that is that then Todd and Ed Park, two brothers. Ed Park was a computer science major at Harvard. His brother Todd, went to Harvard. I keep trying to back Stanford people, and then I always end up with these Harvard people. I don't know what it is. So they ended up. Todd actually started a company called Castlight, which was really the first company that was focused on transparency in healthcare. Transparency of cost, pricing, outcomes. It was too early because we didn't have the data, and we can talk about that because I think it's actually one of the biggest game changers will be getting data now, having interoperability, having data to actually be able to know what the outcomes are of a particular physician, and the cost of it. But they did something called Castlight. It was moderately successful, or Todd did. Unfortunately, he then became the CTO of under Obama for the entire government, and so left me, and that's one reason the company wasn't successful. He came back. Ed and Todd started this company called Devoted, and people think of it as a Medicare Advantage health plan, which is really hard to do from scratch. You're competing with United and Humana and all these names and enormous entities, but their whole vision they laid out literally almost a decade ago, and it was going to be a Medicare Advantage health plan because people are in Medicare Advantage an average of 8 years, so you can actually impact their health, and then you actually benefit because you've lowered cost as an entity. It's hard to do in employer healthcare or any other healthcare because people don't own the patient for very long. So nobody's really incented to take care of them. And what they did was they added to that Medicare Advantage plan Devoted Medical Group, which was a virtual overlay of primary care. So you were getting both. It's like the Kaiser system of payer provider, what they call a payvider. So you own you're helping to manage these people, and you're the insurance entity, which is incredibly important. And, fast forward 10 years, now they have 20,000 agents, AI agents running their company in workflow. They have an AI front end to the Devoted Medical Group. So they not only have primary care, but they have a whole AI front end to the providers. So they have massive leverage on the providers. The consumers absolutely love it. The company tripled this year to a $10 billion company, not adding a person.
Insane.
It's insane.
10 billion.
Yes. I mean, it's kind of wild. So, on the one hand, you worry about employment when you do that really well, right? On the other hand, they're going to be able to expand to be much larger, adding people, but doing it in the right way and supporting patients in the right way. So I'm super excited about what they're doing and how they're leveraging technology, but also, in the end, taking really good care of patients. I mean, the NPS scores are 85, 87%, for them. And when does a health plan ever have a non-negative, rating? So I think in the end, and in healthcare, it's it is so labor intensive that I think when you're creating an entity that can leverage with technology, you can lower costs. This is always our debate in healthcare, right? Well, jobs, service, or lowering costs and improving the service you're providing.
Yeah, there's so much room for improvement in the healthcare industry. I mean, I think if you go back to when you first started, I'm sure you would have expected there'd be a lot of those costs removed. I feel there's still so much room for improvement. One of the things that people talk about in venture capital a lot these days, which is a big difference, is we're not as interested in the founder who's got a great solution, who's got a great product. We want the founders who understand a problem deeply. And it makes sense, right? The technology, the solutions are moving so freaking quickly, right? Whatever they're working on today, in 12 months, it's going to be obsolete. And as you think about your constructing your own portfolio and how that drives your decisions, I feel I want to hear about your move away from therapeutics and whether or not you're going to go back into it, because you've had a lot of success there. But also, when you think about the U.S. healthcare system and how massively bloated it is, it's larger, I think, than the defense budget, right? In terms of what we spend on healthcare every year.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So if you could just talk about, the impact that you hope to have in healthcare, the opportunities that you see for Oak, and how that's driving your portfolio construction. Like, what are you looking for?
Yeah. Well, just like one comment. I mean, the baby boomers have just hit 80, and so we are going to have a much sicker population, for the next 20 years, right? That's aging. So we're going to need a lot of help from technology because we're not going to have all the bodies to take care of all these people. And so I am excited that there'll be a lot of leverage there. It was interesting. I was talking to the largest home healthcare company in the United States, and I was like, usually there's a supply-demand problem. You're always looking for people. We have lack of immigration right now. What's going on? They're like, no, actually, it's working. It's kind of working right now because nurses that were doing more virtual work, some of that work is being leveraged by AI right now. So now we actually have more nurses and caregivers that we can put in the home, which was like, okay, that's a good trade. Nobody's going to be out of a job, but we're just moving them to in person, which is where we're always going to need people, right? So I think we've always done is had a diversified portfolio. Like even in healthcare, healthcare is 20% of the economy, right? You're talking about employer programs, benefits, as the employer as a customer, the payer as a customer, or being a payer, or being a provider. So, we invest in companies that are providers. We've invested in an aggregation of nurse practitioners that are going to be like think of One Medical, but with nurse practitioners that now that they're licensed to do so many things that we're leveraging with AI that are there, and people are usually happier going to a nurse anyway than a doctor, right? And so this company is blowing up. It's because nurse practitioners don't necessarily want to work for these virtual companies or work for somebody else. Now we're empowering nurse practitioners to have their own practices. And we're doing this, this company's doing the software to empower them and doing the marketing to get people to them. So there are things like that where you invest. It's like technology-enabled services. So we've done a lot of what we would call technology-enabled services. And then obviously there's the whole pharma side of it in terms of opportunity. And we've invested mostly there recently in CDMOs and CROs. But wait for it, we're back in drug development.
I thought I heard that. That's exciting. Yeah.
So we're super excited about AI in drug development. I've been looking at AI for 15 years. It really wasn't transformational. You couldn't figure out by looking at a computer-aided, if you look at a drug that's been designed on a computer, you didn't know whether it was going to be more developable, work better in a body, than one that wasn't. You still had, wet labs, et cetera, the whole process. So I think what's incredibly exciting about what's going on right now is that we are looking at models that are progressing at what we thought would take 5 years are now taking 6 months. I've invested in a company called Chai, which is I think it's going to be like the leading just software platform, AI platform for drug design. And they're like proving out things. Literally the models are moving so fast that we can see that the developability, and now frankly, all major pharma companies are all, Lilly signed a massive contract with them, and others are lining up because it's like, oh, this actually works. When we take it to the wet lab, it actually works. And the number of hits, they're saving so much money up front, and they're getting better drugs for the long run. So it's just, I'm just going to see, I think the whole process, which we're going to be in an existential crisis because China is kind of eating our lunch in drug design and development right now. Clinical trials are going over there, but also just and it's not all technology. That they're not beating us that much in technology. They're beating us just throwing bodies at chemistry problems. And so we need to retain that. It's one of our most important industries in the United States. And so, I think it's like with technology, we're going to have to fight back because it's not technology that's taking away jobs. It's going to be technology that keeps jobs and grows jobs here.
Yeah, it's interesting. The 8 of the top 10 universities now, research universities around the world, judged by patents and citations and research papers, are in China. Like that, if you'd asked me 5 years ago if that was remotely possible, I would have said heck no. And so the rate of change there is terrifying. And VCs are now starting to pull together drugs that are being developed in China, and they're in-licensing them, they're buying them, and they're bringing them to market. I mean, the U.S. VCs are moving over to China, and they're investing heavily there. You have great relationships in D.C. Interestingly enough, I know it's complicated and hard, and it may not be your favorite part of your job, but you do. And I think it's because you're seeing sort of ahead of the curve. You're a voice in the wilderness when it comes to healthcare, and you're also a trusted source for information. So first question is, do you think we as VCs have an obligation to have an America first thing? If we are competing with China, and I think competition's healthy, is that something that we ought to be thinking about when we're making investment decisions? And two, I think everybody would love to hear sort of the conversations that you're having down in DC, because they're thinking a lot about healthcare and the costs, and they're also trying to sort of fix things as quickly as they can as well. So you can take them in whatever order you like.
Well, just quickly, FDA is a mess, right? I mean, that is an absolute mess, and there'll be a new head there. And I think they know it, but they don't. The question is, do they know how extreme it is? And, whether it was the last administration or this administration in terms of FDA, we do need to completely change the way we do preclinicals and how we think about the whole clinical process, because our competition in the world is.
Yeah. Operation Warp Speed was one of Trump's great successes, and Trump won.
It was. He doesn't want to claim it.
Yeah.
But yes, it was. And we need to apply those learnings to what's going on right now. And so that, that's an issue. They talk about supply chain, and yet the follow through is not there, which is tough in government. I appreciate that. But the follow through is not there, and that, like advantaging CDMOs in the United States, right? They put these tariffs on that aren't really real. And I'm not advocating for, like tariffs on drugs, from overseas, but I do feel like we've got to figure out a way to support our manufacturing facilities in the U.S. I think we learned, 90% of all antibiotic components during COVID were produced in China. It's just dangerous. I mean, this is actually not just a healthcare issue, right? This is a security issue for the U.S. So, they definitely have to think about that more. Strangely, one of our former CEOs is head of Medicaid there. And
In China.
No, sorry. Here.
Yeah.
In DC.
Yeah.
In DC. And he's a good person. He's got the right. His company actually was a whole social determinants of health. Like, you can't look at Medicaid, as just here we're, it's just not healthcare as we define it in such a small, limited way. It's mental health, it's food insecurity, it is homelessness. It's, he looks at the whole thing. So he's really actually trying to redesign Medicaid to be about outcomes and rethink, what these managed care entities are doing, and align. Like, we don't have managed care in Connecticut, but we have to think about how we manage the dual eligibles, the really sick. We do well at normal, like populations, average populations in terms of their healthcare status, but terribly in dual eligibles and really sick. So we have to be rethinking how we're doing that. And I think he's putting some real thought to that. And I think it is actually really important to have business people that have lived with these problems, practical operating people, go in and understand what's going on. I mean, like, for example, Equifax, every state has to pay them literally for every draw when you're trying to figure out whether somebody's working and their eligibility and income eligibility. We're state of Connecticut was paying Equifax like $20 a pop. And so they have this like $400 million of cash flow that's coming from the feds and all the states And he's totally renegotiating that. So, trying to help us in some ways. And, on the fraud and waste, I mean, people love to say that, it's not the biggest issue, but, like autism's a big problem. Like right now people are like sending people, like if you, our Medicaid was, say 350 million more than we had budgeted in the state of Connecticut this year, and that was like true across the country. And it's drugs and it is autism, the two biggest offenders. And I think we've expanded the definition of autism, so almost everybody fits into it. But it's also these firms that are now sending people out of state, to facilities in Vermont because Vermont reimburses. They pay more, so that's a problem. And they're going after that. Half of all hospices in the country were in LA. It's literally, if you talk to your friends that live there, like, yeah, my plumber owns a hospice. And so they've taken 1,000 out. They probably need to take another 1,000 out there. So there is hospice fraud that's going on. Yeah. So some of that is real. I just think there are also obviously so many other big issues in healthcare.
So for all of us to think about and inspire and sort of coax people into sort of addressing the problem, if you were to meet with a bunch of Yale students and faculty and were to say there's one problem which can be fixed with technology, with smarts, with just sort of discipline to go after it, and there's so many different areas to choose from, but if you were to point them in one direction, say go there, where the U.S. is going to be able to get the most benefit and where there's the most upside for them with their careers, where would you point them? Which problem?
Well,
which agency?
Maybe two different questions here, but I think for me the biggest problem is data and interoperability. Just starting there, because I think we can't apply AI. We cannot the application of AI to your data. Like as a consumer, you want to know everything about your health, and you want information at your fingertips about what you should be doing about it, right? I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. We just had somebody, a 50-year-old in our office do a diabetic crash into hospital, had insulin shock. He didn't even know that he was pre-diabetic. And we have a company that's focused on pre-diabetes and, the whole issue of monitoring your, HA1Cs and yet, I don't know how many have you had your A1Cs tested in the last 6 months or a year? And the reality is like, that's just something that he should have known it, his doctor, who knows that, right? Okay, well, the payer's not going to know that. And your primary care, everybody expects their primary care to be responsible. Well, they're not actually paid to be responsible. I mean, in essence, right? They are, but they aren't. They're overwhelmed and they don't have all the information. And the reality is at the end of the day, the consumer needs to have access, and your primary care doc and others, everybody needs to have complete access to your information. And that is going to be, I think, extremely helpful. And then it's about financial alignment. Right? It's about financial alignment because we have to figure out how to pay people to care about that, right? How to pay people to care about people's health before they enter a hospital. And we're going to have plenty of business. As I said, there are plenty of 80-year-olds coming. Like hospitals are going to be overwhelmed with acute care. We need to keep people out of the hospital. We need to figure out how to do that. We need to figure out how to pay people, have a financial alignment with whether it's your primary care, some practice that cares about your health.
Right.
But they can only do that if there's full and free flow of information and transparency on outcomes and performance.
Yeah. And there's so many entrenched interests trying to keep that away, including Epic and others, right?
Don't get me started on Epic. I mean, I don't. It's the biggest monopoly, in America, and that no one goes after. Where's the DOJ when you need them?
Okay, so changing to Connecticut, your ability to pick founders and choose people extends to who you chose. The most important decision was your husband, and when you first met Ned. So curious, how did you guys meet? How did you meet the governor?
Well, I said he weirdly showed up the same month I did in Westport, Connecticut. But it's the old-fashioned way. I don't know. Now you have to meet people on Hinge. But this was like, I'm in San Francisco. I call one of my best friends from Wisconsin who lives in New York. She's dating this guy named Richard Edelman of Edelman PR agency. You've heard of that? And she's like, oh my God, we have the perfect guy for you, Ned Lamont. And weirdly, he's moving to Westport too. So literally the first week they introduced us, and like we met and it was done. We were married the next year. It was like, we just knew. So like a great entrepreneur, you just know.
You've seen, the governor and you have overseen a lot of really positive changes for Connecticut. But we're still not really on the map for a lot of people in terms of the innovation, the entrepreneurialism, for the growth that we were seeing here. The governor paid down, and this administration has paid down massive amounts of our unfunded liabilities. There's so many good things happening. Why is that? Why is the story of Connecticut rebound and snapback? Why do you think people don't know about that as much as they should?
Well, maybe you feel it on the entrepreneurial side. I do, there's this thing called Startup Westport, right?
Yeah.
There 5,000 people showed up for their last event. I actually think something is happening, and people are coming to Connecticut. They are, with their feet. They're speaking. The reality is we need more housing, right? That's our issue, because people want to come in. That's the reason our housing prices keep going up, is we don't have enough supply, but people actually do want to come here. And I do feel like from an entrepreneurial standpoint, things are going to change a lot in the next 5 years. I think Connecticut Innovation has done an amazing job of investing in life sciences and more broadly, but this New Haven has become a hub. Biotech is back. We've had a tough 4 years, but it is back. And I think it's just be growing. You've had 2 amazing outcomes this year in your portfolio. He really does run the most successful state-funded venture fund in the country. It's kind of crazy. So I do think that Hartford is growing. We're converting the commercial to residential. They're getting filled the minute they go up. Mm-hmm. New Haven is coming back, and I think the interesting thing is we're investing in a lot of tech forward founders right now, but I actually think that that AI tools will allow more people who aren't as technical to start companies that have that create product, and I think that's going to actually advantage the state too, because we have a lot of life sciences talent. We haven't kept as much young technical talent. We're growing it, but I also think that if all that I do believe in person. For a lot of things, but I do feel like technical talent remotely, virtually, can support companies in Connecticut and anywhere. And I see it in a lot of our companies. Their tech talent is not necessarily where the hub is.
Right. So, one of my frustrations has been when the governor first came in, he took on DMV. Because this is the thing that everybody touches. Everybody's frustrated. And talk about Operation Warp Speed. 12 months later, you can do everything online. Everybody's experience with the DMV, I think, in Connecticut is extraordinarily good. And that was one of his first. It was super sage, right? And he fixed it. But I think some of the momentum around getting state government to adopt change, to push for innovation, to adopt AI, to move faster, and to break things and to innovate, that's not really happening in Connecticut as much as it could. And you have so much spending in the state where if you were to get startups involved.
You're going to get me in a lot of trouble here.
Yeah, putting on the spot. But would love to hear your thoughts. What's stopping us? We have a chance to do something here. Why are we not jumping on it?
I'll add on to the DMV thing. Actually, as of June, you can now have a virtual digital driver's license too. Oh. So not only signing up online, but now, like New York State, you don't have to be carrying your paper license with you, which is crazy. It takes that long. But so Look, I really, yes, we should probably be using more technology. There actually is, the legislature put in place a bill which restricts the use of AI in some ways. And so I think it's going to be an interesting 5 years in terms of figuring out, like, just how to get people to use the tools. And I think the reality is right now, people are using Microsoft every day. AI is embedded in it. So I think it just becomes part of people's lives, and then it doesn't feel, there are certainly threatening things about AI, and there are bad things about it. But I think it will be embedded, and people will see that there is massive leverage in using it, and can just make your job easier. I mean, certainly clinicians are finding that every day now. Like, wow, I don't have to go home and do notes for an hour at night. I'm done. Like, I saw my last patient. I'm going home. I'm going to see my kids. So taking away the friction, those pieces of your job, hugely valuable.
Can I make a suggestion for
Yes.
you and the governor to think about
Please.
on this regard?
You say it. I won't say it.
I don't know how many commissioners and how many state agencies we have, but if you were to deploy 5, 10, 25 college grads from this AI native into each one of these agencies and say, your job is to fix things. A little bit like people criticize Doge and there's so much to criticize, but there was also a lot of good that could have been done if it had been a concerted effort by getting people in there to just go in and find ways to use technology to make things better. I think that, like, there's a lot of people who felt like that was the right momentum. I think there's a lot of people in Connecticut who would love that job. And so just something to think about. I'll be with the governor later. I'll bring it up to him too.
We'll talk later about it.
Okay, founder advice. What for the founders in the room? What's the you as the founder? What's the piece of advice that somebody told you that you thought was useful, or something you thought was not useful, or what would you tell the founders in the room that you think can make them ready to come to Oak and to pitch you and the Oak team?
Well, I mean, the first thing we always say, which seems so obvious, but sometimes not obvious, because people want healthcare to be a certain way, like we all have a dream of how it should be. And I just say, first of all, just who pays and why. You just have to know that, because it is about financial alignment at the end of the day. So understanding that, and then just it is interesting, because I do feel like some of the most unique problems will be science-led, will be on the whole life sciences part, because there are so many people starting AI companies right now in every sector. Like, finding something unique is challenging. And so I think it's finding something that you're passionate about, that you can be literally the best person in the United States to do. And if you're not now, like, become the expert. Because I think when somebody comes in the door and I'm talking to them, I want to believe that you're the person, you're the woman, you're the guy that's going to make this happen. And if there are 10 other startups that are circling around what you're doing, you're going to win, because you care more, you're more resilient, you're going to work harder, you're going to attract the best people because they want to work with you. You kind of have to have those elements in a competitive world. But there's a lot of money out there. I mean, that's what's changed the most since I got into the business. There are a lot of companies and there's a lot of money, and you should be able to find it, because people are like, there's a lot of seed money out there. There's Connecticut Innovations, and so if you've got a good idea, this is a great time to actually start a company.
Is there one or two signals that you're looking for when you meet these founders to to know that they're the one out of the 10? How do you know? I mean, when you're meeting somebody, they come to you for a 45-minute pitch. How do you decide if this is the one we're going to take the second meeting with?
Because people have to fundamentally really believe in themselves and believe in the proposition. So it has to be something where I feel like they love this, they care about this, they are going to do anything to make this happen, and that what they want to do is important. It's going to make a difference, and it's going to be scaled. We have a larger fund, so we're not, like somebody may do something really well that becomes a $50 million company. That's great. That's just not for us. But, so we're looking for scale impact. So it's somebody who thinks big, but not just dreams big, like is really weirdly dreams big, but in the weeds, like very detail oriented and can actually navigate that. And then they got to be a Pied Piper. I mean, you not only have to be able to attract the best, you have to know what the best looks like. So that's why I go back to I don't want arrogance. I want confidence, because you have to be secure enough to get really smarter people than you around you, or that what you're not good at. Like if you don't have EQ and insight into that, and you're worried about being the smartest person in the room, which some people are, that's a problem. You're not going to build the best team. You're not going to create the best company.
At CI, we score each of the companies, and one of the factors is their Pied Piper effect of the founder. Okay, going into the turns. I've got 1 minute left before we go to questions. 2035. What did everybody in this room miss? What's your prediction for the future? What are we all not expecting that you think is going to come? I think your point about the boomers is super interesting, right? That we're just hitting, and they're hitting 80 now. That's terrifying. It's a bow wave we're not ready for.
Yeah, it's I think what we're about to have is, and I think maybe I'm being optimistic, but I actually feel like in every in every revolution, every transformation, the problem with AI is it's coming so fast that people are worried, and at some level, I'm sure there are people that should be worried about their jobs. But I do feel like in 10 years, it's going to create so much productivity, and people are going to be just thinking about jobs differently. If you look back, 80 years, 60% of the jobs that we have now didn't exist then. And I just think that we're going to find there are so many jobs. My son bought a couple of Instagram accounts, and this is what he does. He has, he has a podcast, an Instagram account, and it's a real job. He makes real money doing it. He had to explain that to me a while ago. So I just feel like I think it's going to be needed. I think that we are going to see a 2035, where we are going to be not as worried about, do we have to pay universal basic income? People need to work for their self-respect and dignity. So I think having jobs are very important. But I do think that AI can let 1,000 flowers bloom, and we're going to create a competitive, society with the rest of the world. Can't let them take
love
us
it. Thank you. I'm sure there's a million questions, so let's keep them quick, and we'll sort of kind of go through a speed round. Do you want to go first, sir?
Thanks, Matt. So, Greg Grinberg, Origin Foundation. I think you can be in an ecosystem like this only for so long before it becomes painfully obvious that there are so many great breakthroughs being made. Could be transformative against the chronic disease epidemic that I think you alluded to, but that never make it to patients, not because they're not safe or don't work, but because they can't navigate the gauntlet of translation and commercialization. So I always love to ask my fellow investors if there are a handful of the ones that got away. Maybe things that you heard about that were not investable but might have had transformative impact, kind of the ones that you think back to and wish you could have invested in.
It's a great question. I would say, I think, as my husband always says, you've been in healthcare 30 years. Why is it not better? I've been trying to make this better. And I actually think I am so excited to actually be part of what's happening now, because I do think that we are going to see a transformation over the next 10 to 20 years like we have never seen, where we can actually manage people to healthier lives. Now, the most impactful things have clearly been drugs. I didn't back the company that did GLP-1s, right? I should have been in biotech and backed that company, those companies, because that is probably the most transformative drug we have right now, right? And I do hope that it, moderates obesity and improves health. So that's probably a miss for me, not being in biotech at that moment. But I think now, I think that getting access to data, I think making it ubiquitous, I think financial alignment is massive, but I do think that we're going to lower the administrative costs, which have created a lot of burden on us and clinicians and have increased costs around the country. And I think that'll be helpful. And in terms of getting, getting things to market faster, I mean, some of that is FDA, some of that is, is there a business model, unfortunately, around the particular drug or treatment or procedure? And it has to, in our for-profit world, it's got to, unfortunately, find its way to making money. And I say that knowing, there is no difference, and that's where we say this, but between a for-profit and a not-for-profit hospital, because every decision is made by a doctor. So I've been on boards of not-for-profits and for-profits, and they all have the same thing. They're all just trying to eke out a bottom line, to keep going. And it's a very complex system to manage. And so we really need to take out the costs. If you think of where the costs are in healthcare, it's in systems and it's in drugs. And drugs, hopefully we can lower costs in the future, but they're also life-changing.
I'll give you my answer afterwards. Jason.
First of all, Matt and Annie, thank you for your service and leadership for us in the state of Connecticut. My question, though, is fast forward 10 years in venture capital. What does venture capital look like in 10 years? Do the big guys continue to get bigger and bigger? Do the seed stage funds get kind of squeezed out because they can't pay the premium valuations? Do we keep throwing tons of capital, whether necessary, to companies? That just curious to get your crystal ball.
Yeah. It's a great question because I think it's a little like this economy. It's kind of K-shaped, in that, right? I mean, you're going to have people doing extraordinarily well and people not. And, we're going to figure out that as a society. And I think in investing, I do feel like it's going to be big. I think they're going to be smaller, earlier stage funds. I think seed will always exist. And I do think there'll be smaller funds. And then I think you're going to have a bunch of big guys. And I don't think it's a good thing, actually. We're almost 2 billion. We're not big enough. It's kind of crazy because we don't want to be an index fund. And I'll just give you one anecdote. There's a very, very large fund that I won't name because you'll know the name. And they happen to be in Anthropic. And anybody who's in OpenAI, Anthropic, whatever, their funds are going to crush, and people are going to throw money at them. Institutions, state pensions, whatever, are going to throw money at them. And they're destroying valuations across the market right now because they're like, we're just going to put this $6 billion to work. We don't really care what price we're paying. We're going to put it out there so we can raise our next fund because we've got Anthropic in this fund. And so we can go out and raise an even bigger fund because our returns are going to be so great. That is destroying the industry right now. So that, I think it's going to be a real caution. So, hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully that isn't actually what it looks like, but I'm worried about that.
Thank you, Matt and Annie, for being here. So I'm a nurse practitioner. I've worked, in nursing for about 10 years. Now I've worked in surgical practices. I work in primary care. And I've seen, starting as a volunteer nurse assistant, from a different view. Now I'm an entrepreneur, founder, and I still attend pitch things. And I run into so many startups that they don't get the issue they're trying to solve. They don't understand. They fundamentally flawed. However, I see a lot of investment groups go after them because they sound pretty, they sound cool, but a clinician is like, good luck. How do you guys view through that lens, or how do you guys filter out the cool looking things that don't work versus the things that don't look cool that actually could?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the point I made earlier. I agree, and we have so many people that come to us, and it's like, wow, that would be so cool, but who pays and why? Right? And do you really understand the fundamental problem you're trying to solve? And is that a real problem? And so I agree. I think there are a number of people that's why I say like dreamers and doers, because I think you have to be really pragmatic to be a great entrepreneur, really understand a problem, really want to solve that problem. And it has to be big enough to care to solve, right? To go through all the pain and put the money and all of that. So I think, yeah, and that will always be the case. There will be always people thinking about issues, particularly in healthcare, because it's so complex. It's kind of nice because we have like third generation entrepreneurs who failed in healthcare that now get it, that are actually out there again, going at it.
We've got time for one last question. Please.
So you mentioned earlier that companies need young people. How are they currently recruiting people?
How are companies recruiting people? Well, I think I would say it's interesting. For young startups, there are a lot of young entrepreneurs that are starting up companies right now that are recruiting their friends. So I have met more 20 to 27-year-olds at companies in the last 6 months than ever before. So I actually think it's like network with your friends that are starting. Literally, it's just know a lot of good people, and that is going to be your best way in. For us, for established companies, sometimes our companies are like too small to almost have training programs, right? But frankly, now with AI native people, young people coming out of college, we're probably going to be hiring, as I said, more young people coming into jobs. And how do we find them? Literally people at that stage would have to apply because